Do you want your longevity business to crush it this year? You are in the right place. Every week, we're diving deep into cutting-edge longevity science and profitable business strategies. You'll discover what's working right now for top clinics and get practical ideas to boost your own business. I'm your host, Brent Wallace, and this is the Longevity Loop Podcast. All right, Dr. Jack Penner, take two. Welcome to the Longevity Loop Podcast. We can hear each other just fine. So yeah, let's just jump into it. We got a little bit of a time constraint, so let's just get right into it. But first off, I just do want to say that this podcast is for information purposes only for anyone listening. Anything that me and Dr. Jack Penner talk about today is for informational purposes. It's not meant to diagnose, treat, or cure any medical conditions. So always consult a qualified medical provider for your personalized medical advice, because all of this stuff is very specific to who you are, especially important with the longevity medicine. There's not a one size fits all. This is all they call it precision medicine for a reason. It's very much just for you and your genetics. So just make sure anything that we talk about here, it's not advice in any way, shape, or form. Me and Jack are just having a conversation as friends, and we're really big fans of the longevity community medicine 3.0. So that's that taken. Jack, you are formerly from UCSF faculty, and you've recently made the jump to Kuros, your new brick and mortar and telemedicine longevity. What made that jump? And just tell me a little bit about that background and what brought you into longevity medicine.
Yeah, awesome, Brad. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. I think for me, the transition felt a bit like a stepping into something new and a coming home to something that I have felt quite acquainted with for a long time. I came up in the sports performance area. I was an athlete growing up, played sports throughout high school, played water polo in college at Santa Clara University, and always had a huge affinity for training, sports performance, and that sort of health aspect of things. I was also really privileged to grow up in a house with a primary care physician. My dad was a community primary care doc for 45 years or so.
I didn't know that. That's super cool.
So I saw kind of both sides of it. Right? I had my own experience as an athlete. I saw primary care and preventative health and really the relationships that he was able to build with his patients over the course of my entire life. And when I finished playing water polo, I was sort of in college. I was majoring in public health. I was considering a career in the public health sphere, also considering a career in medicine. And I think the things that really came together for me to lead me into medicine was around that aspect of the sort of one-on-one relationship, the chance to really get to walk with somebody kind of over the course of their lifespan and over the course of their health span. And then I personally, when it came to athletics and playing water polo, I loved competing, yes, but I also just really loved the training side of it. And so after I finished playing, I sort of spent some time doing strength and conditioning coaching and doing fitness coaching with athletes, but also with individuals who just wanted to, take control of their health, maybe lose some weight, improve their fitness overall. And it was really in that sphere, kind of having this eye towards a career in medicine while doing the work of fitness coaching, that I was like, wow, this feels like what primary care could be and should be, which was, the opportunity to work on lifestyle strategies, work on lifestyle implementation in ways that I felt like the fitness coaches and strength and conditioning coaches had the opportunity to, in ways that physicians didn't necessarily because of the ways that the system was structured. And then at that same time, there was sort of other things kind of coming into my own sphere of information. This was probably around 2012, 2013. I started to read Peter Attia's blog when at that time it was called the Eating Academy, and he was just starting to write a little bit. And I think there were these different inputs around athletic performance and health, chronic disease prevention, and then my own aspirations to pursue a career in medicine that made me feel like, wow, this is a real home base. Throughout residency training, in the move from medical school to residency, I kind of had a rude awakening of how challenging the system is to support that kind of work, and really fell in love with the medical education side of things. And that sort of started a career path in academics. But over the last couple of years,
Just to interject right there, when you say the system, you're kind of talking about all the red tape and bureaucracy that's involved in the we'll call it medicine 2.0 system, right? Is that what you're talking about when you're just
exactly? Yeah, the red tape, the bureaucracy, but also the way that system has to operate at scale that leaves patients with little bits of time with their clinicians, and also a system that's really designed to make people, sort of functional but not necessarily optimal, right? There really is sort of the avoidance of disease rather than the cultivation of health. That is a necessary aspect of a system that's really focused on a little bit more reactive care and a little bit more of taking care of major emergencies as opposed to setting people up with a foundation. And so working with that challenge, I was like, I don't know that I can bring these aspirations that I had into a traditional medical system. And so I kind of put that on the back burner for the first few years of my career. But quickly, those aspirations came knocking again. And it felt like it was a time to make a shift, both for my own fulfillment, but also seeing how much momentum there has been in the health and wellness community around this move towards more proactive and more personalized preventative care.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just right there with you. I remember, I think Tim Ferriss is who introduced me to Peter Attia, talking about the merging of longevity medicine with athletics. And I always remember him talking about like drinking ketones, tasting like rocket fuel and all those. I was like, whoa, that's what you have to do for be high performance, so, but that was also kind of one of my earliest, kind of integrations to longevity medicine, but also with the crossover of not just living a long life, but also being health optimized to be a great athlete, as far as like the recovery, the sleep, the supplementation, the different diets, stuff like that. So you're touching on, which both me and you know as medicine 3.0, which is a term that Peter Attia, I think he coined it, but how would you define it? I mean, you basically defined it, but if you're going to succinctly say what medicine 3.0 is, how would you describe this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everyone has their own way of framing it. I really come back to those principles of proactive, personalized preventative care that's really in service, not to a specific number, on a blood test or a specific set of metrics, but ideally in service to the life that people want to age into. I think if we look at the way that the traditional medical system is organized now, we talked about this idea of sort of absence of disease being the hallmark rather than the presence and the cultivation of health and meaning and fulfillment. And when I think about medicine 3.0, it's saying, wow, we have so many tools and so many advancements in the space of diagnostics now to really help people get a very clear picture of where their current risks are, where the opportunities for improvement are, but also where things are functioning really well. And I think if we stop there, right, we can end up sticking around in the medicine 2.0 realm and say, okay, you don't have this disease, you're at risk for this disease, and let's keep an eye on this. But if we take that a step further and say, okay, how can we take that information, look at the life that somebody wants to age into over the next 30, 40, hopefully 50 plus years, and sort of use that North Star and then backcast to where someone is now and say, okay, how do we take the information that we have, adjust what you're doing from a lifestyle perspective, but also some of the more advanced tools around supplements, medications, and other interventions, and really mix that together into a plan that says this is what's going to help you get from where you are now to where you want to go. And to do that, ideally with a physician or a care team walking alongside you to help you troubleshoot along the way. So I think it has that personalized component where we're taking that individual's information along with that individual's ideal destination. It's proactive. Ideally, we're starting very, very early on in the process rather than waiting until disease is there and causing problems. We're saying let's start to keep an eye on this early. And it's really focused on the prevention of what we know are the common chronic diseases of aging: cardiovascular, metabolic, hormonal, body composition changes, and then also the neurodegenerative diseases, and saying let's start early so that we can set you up to navigate these known transitions of life as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I like that term. I've never heard that term, age into. How do you want to age into this next section of life? It kind of reminds me of almost like a butterfly caterpillar metamorphosis or something,
Totally.
but that's a really cool term. I've never heard that used before. So, I was looking at your website and you talk about like, some of the big hallmarks of aging and also the things that bring humans down, right? And that's heart disease, Alzheimer's, cancer. So this proactive approach that you're talking about, how does that differ from today's primary care, or I guess you'd call it, the medicine 2.0 establishment? What are the nuances there? How would you describe that?
I think I would say there's three things that come to mind. The first is when we decide that there's something worth paying attention to, right? So one of the things that I try to do in my practice is set pretty aggressive benchmarks around where I hope people will be. So if we use, for example, metabolic health as an example here, some of the common metrics that may raise a flag in a general primary care clinic, might be a hemoglobin A1C, sneaking up into the sixes. Certainly 6.5% is leads to the diagnosis of diabetes. Some people say 5.7% is pre-diabetes, and that's when we should start to pay attention to metabolic health. But in my own practice, I really try to say, let's look at the whole picture of metabolic health and try to decide where problems are. And so a hemoglobin A1C that's creeping close to 5.7%, I think is something to start to pay attention to. If we start to see people's fasting glucose levels creep up into the triple digits, above 100, or their fasting insulin move up, ideally it would stay at around 7 or below. But if we start to see that sneak up, but also functional tests, right? What's the output where they're able to maintain, still a conversational pace, whether that's running or walking or on the bike. And to start to say, rather than setting the threshold of paying attention at, we see clear problems, let's start to set the threshold at a spot where we're saying, man, if this trajectory continues over 10 years, things are going to get really bad. So let's start to act now before the problem has come up. So I think one is that having that lower benchmark. The second one is just the tools that we're able to use. Again, so much progress has been made around diagnostics that a lot of the common traditional lab panels, whether that's for cardiovascular disease risk prediction, metabolic health, neurodegenerative disease risk prediction, it's hard to get access to some of the testing, whether that's ApoB levels or Lp(a), things like ApoE4 allele testing, continuous glucose monitoring. These are tools that are out there that can be incredibly powerful for the right person at the right time. And my hope is to be able to make those available to folks who would benefit from them, rather than, as you alluded to before, there being all kinds of red tape and bureaucracy to run through. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's been my experience. If I look back and still, like, I still have my longevity doctor and I still have my primary care doctor, and my primary care doctor is the kind of once a year checkup, like bend over, cough, hit you on the knee with a, that type of thing. But yeah, it's so funny that I'll ask my PCP is like, hey, what about getting a continuous glucose monitor or something like that? And they're like, no, you're not, your numbers are fine on here. Whereas like, I'll ask my longevity doctor and he's like, heck yeah, let's go for it. Let's see what's going on. So you can really learn about your body. And that's, one of the ways I define it as well, is that older system, which is still good for so much. Like you said, if you break an ankle or you have something acute that you have to deal with, that system is great for that. But the preventative side of that approaches isn't as robust as medicine 3.0, with being proactive. Hey, like, this is just starting to edge up, at the upper end of normal. Let's start tackling it now before it becomes prediabetes or it becomes a problem for you, in that. And you can also, and then also with the modern diagnostic tools that you have. I mean, even just like this Whoop is just crazy, right. Like how much data it gives me. And I luckily have a team around me and I have knowledge that I can interpret it, but it's just so much different than the old traditional primary care system that you have on there. So, and the other thing I want to ask you about that kind of piggybacks on this is that, so central to you and what you're doing at Kuros, as well as other longevity docs and just the future of medicine, precision medicine, is personalized care is so central to this medicine 3.0 philosophy. So with you personally, like having the time and space to spend with your patients, how does that change the quality of care you can provide with them?
Yeah, it's a perfect segue because it really is the third piece of that component of what I'm trying to do with the practice, right? We said we're going to set very, very high markers of what health looks like. We're going to use all the tools available to us to get information. But then I think the critical piece is helping people implement these, right? Where the rubber meets the road in terms of the changes that we're going to make, and to be able to deliver really high touch care in that process. I don't want to be a physician that just says things like, oh yeah, diet and exercise are important, go ahead and do it. I really want to be sort of on the ground with them and be like, what are you eating for breakfast? What are you eating for lunch? Send me pictures of your meals and we can make tweaks here. See how your energy feels, see how your digestion feels. I'm really lucky to have some of the background training in the fitness and the sports performance space. And so I'm comfortable looking at training programs or making recommendations when it comes to programming or when it comes to people's exercise technique, and say, hey, send me your lifting routine. Okay, we're going to make some changes here. I want you to go up to 4 resistance training sessions a week, and we're going to pare down the intensity of some of the aerobic work. And, to really have all of these pieces start to integrate together beyond just the platitudes of like diet and exercise are important. How are we actually tactically approaching this based off of the data that we were able to gather so that we continue to be in service to the life that this person wants to age into?
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes it so cool that there's such that high touch and you have the ability to spend the time there. And that also segues into, you recently wrote a Substack article titled The False Promises of Health Information. And I really love that article. I was just like, yeah, Jack, nice. This is so cool because it, and I want you to definitely talk about what inspired you to write that piece and kind of the nuances of it. But that's the thing, like I was talking about with the Fitbit or something like that, or Apple Watch or whatever wearable you might have, or even a continuous glucose monitor. If you have these things and all this data without the team or the experience or knowledge to interpret it, like you get really lost and whatever. And so like reading that article, I'm like, yeah, that's such a good fact. There's more data and information than ever before, but yet there's kind of, like you guys are taking care of it in the Medicine 3.0 as far as spending the time. And like you said, like, hey, I want you to do some more resistance training or whatever that prescription may be. But what inspired you to write that piece and just maybe talk about it a little bit? And anyone listening, definitely go check out that piece on Substack. It's a great article.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, I mean, I'm always excited when people read it and when it resonates. I think for me, what inspired me was I have been so excited seeing what has been an explosion in this space, right? Especially in the direct-to-consumer side of things. It has become easier and easier for people to get really comprehensive lab testing, really comprehensive imaging studies. And, I think a lot of clinicians have differing perspectives on this. I am vehemently in favor of people having more information about their bodies and their health. Where I start to get concerned is when the models that are being designed around those really, health information platforms, it's not what they offer patients, it's actually what they don't offer individuals who are pursuing them, which is that relational approach to things, right? There may be a summary of the lab panel results, there may be a one-time visit with somebody to help make sense of them, but from my perspective, this work of improving someone's lifespan, improving someone's health span, right? Not just the years in the life, but the quality of the life in those years. That's a real incremental process that I think unfolds over years and decades rather than weeks and months. And so when there's so much information without the care and the relationship paired with the information that someone's receiving, I start to feel concerned that people are going to end up actually more confused than they were when they started. And so I think seeing that trend come up where people can get hundreds of biomarkers tested, or they can get really nuanced imaging studies of looking for early cancers or looking for cardiovascular disease, but then not necessarily having somebody to say, hey, what does this mean in general? What does this mean for me today? And how does this influence what I should be doing over the next 5 years, 15 years, or even 35 years? And I think, again, that's where that relationship that I really hope to be able to build and preserve and maintain with members of my practice over time, I think that's where that comes in. And there's so much shine about the data and the information. And I would love to see more and more of that shine come around the relationship and the relational aspect of it, because I think all of the data without care, we lose the person who this is all about,
Yeah. And I was just going to touch on that too, that I see a lot of AI stuff trying to bridge that gap of like, okay, here's, if you go do a pre-novo, for instance, which is a full body MRI, which is amazing, but it's just like, okay, here's your scan. And they have a clinician there to like walk you through it or whatever. But without a game plan, with someone like you on my side to say, okay, cool, this is what this gave us. You might have low bone density or whatever. Let's work, like more resistance training or whatever the prescription might be. So like when your experience there, like we've got the AI that's kind of bridging the gap, but it's not there by any means yet. What is the right balance between like patient-driven health information, like we're all listening to podcasts and reading books and finding out about all this stuff, and then seeking a physician's guidance, and obviously this would be someone in the Medicine 3.0, as we've been talking about, guidance versus your primary care physician. Although, I mean, still discuss it with your primary care and see what happens. But, like we're just kind of talking about, that's probably not the best solution. But there's a balance there, right? It's like self-administer. I mean, you can get anything online now, from peptides to nootropics to whatever. So, I mean, you really can be 100% out there on your own. But there's a balance there, right? Of educating yourself as a consumer and then also seeking a physician's guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And where that balance point is going to be is going to really differ from person to person, right? Somebody who has multiple comorbidities, right? They may have known cardiovascular disease, they may have a recent diagnosis of prediabetes and be really worried about navigating a family history of cancer. That's a very different picture than somebody who's maybe in their early 30s, completely healthy and is really excited and motivated about entering into this space. And so I think that balance point varies person to person, but one of the things that I consistently come back to is that a lot of times that patient-directed health information gets someone started, right? It might inspire them to make a change. It might make a problem that they didn't know was there. It might make that more known to them, and that can sometimes get people starting to move. But for most people, at some point along the way, we start to hit a speed bump, right? We start a strength training routine and our shoulders or our hips or our knees start to hurt. We may be able to make some nutritional changes, but we feel really hungry all the time, or we're not making the progress that we hoped we were going to be able to make, or we find out that, hey, this change that I made in my diet and exercise did wonders for my metabolic health, but now all of a sudden, my doc told me that my lipids are out of whack and my heart disease risk has actually gone up, right? So there may be some of these countermeasures that come up. And all of those examples are things that I've talked with patients about directly. And I think those are the moments where we say, wow, I was able, what I tell them is you were able to take this so far on your own. And now I just have the opportunity to get to help you continue to take this further. And I think hopefully that's where clinicians in the medicine 3.0 space, they can offer the sort of practical on the ground guidance that can be much easier for people to navigate with the accountability and the support of an expert, but also that more integrated approach, right? To say, hey, we know that this is going to make this better, but we also need to look over here for the counterbalance, right? Focusing more on resistance training may do wonders for your bone density, but if we lose sight of your aerobic fitness in that process, right, that piece of the system may get better in terms of bone density, but we want to make sure that the whole system is moving forward. And I think that's where the integrated lens of clinicians who are, experienced and interested in this space can really, really help people take things to the next level further than they could travel on their own.
Yeah. No, I mean, you just said a word there, accountability. And that was just something that really, I'm like, yeah, that's so true. Like the relationships I have with the professionals I work with, so much of it is obviously knowledge and getting another set of eyes on it. It's like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm training for. And then also having the accountability there is like, hey, how did you feel after that? Like that. So, like in our pre-conversation, I was talking about, I have a 50-mile walk scheduled in May that I've been, walking long miles, and it's great to get my longevity docs involved with like, hey, cool, like here's a healing protocol that you can heal faster. Is like, hey, my joint, my hip is just a little off. It's like, okay, let's check that out, and just see like, do you need some body work, or, just pinging around some ideas there. And I think that's a huge part of it, the accountability, and then just to get like a second set of eyes and then really be able to work with someone on these goals, specific goals and whatever, and like what you want to age into, like you were saying earlier. It's like, what are these goals? Are they longevity? Are they sports performance? All the things. And, you're going to guide people through these processes just a little bit differently based on what those goals are. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, hopefully anyone listening to this will have someone in their corner that is really guiding them. And I don't recommend at all trying to do it on your own. Learn about it as much as you can, like we're talking about that, seeking the information, but also getting someone on your side that can really implement it correctly and going there. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, like I'm a marketer. I talk and deal with longevity clinics and longevity businesses specifically to help market their services. You're in the beginning stages of building Curos out. I know you've got the telemedicine thing going on in New York and California, and you have future aspirations to build a brick and mortar in California. What's that process been like so far for you? Like with hurdles, or have you been finding it easy? How's that been going?
Yeah, I would say it has been a learning process for sure. Like I came from a world where all I really had to focus on was being a clinician and being a teacher when I was in academics. And there's just new problems to learn and to solve. I will say I was definitely a little bit naive when I was first getting started. I kind of had a angels in the outfield mindset of like, if I build it, they will come. And I think over time it has really been a process of really getting clear on, one, what the value is that I can offer, two, who for whom I think I can be valuable, and then finding different ways to connect with those folks. Like the advice that you gave when we talked a few weeks ago has been immensely helpful, just for some of the back end tweaks around website design and SEO and things like that. And then the other piece of it is really, having the courage and the willingness to step out there and meet people, and hopefully be able to get the word out, which has left me incredibly grateful for opportunities like this to get to talk with someone like you who's experienced in this space and has been so supportive and encouraging. So yeah, I would say it has been both challenging, but so enlivening every step of the way, because the new relationships that I've gotten to build, I think, have really exceeded the expectations that I could have had. And it's always fun to get to connect with people on the way, whether it's patients who have reached out thinking about joining the practice or other clinicians or people who are just interested in this space. It's been such a dynamic community to get to step into.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, I agree with there. Like, part of the reason I have chosen to specifically work with doctors and longevity practices and clinics, because it is such an exciting emerging field that's like a lot of people are so interested in, and it's so desperately needed. And I can imagine a lot of your excitement is, well, we know this. It's a shared excitement that I have as well. It's so much fun to bring this messaging to people. Like, I love sharing, health stuff and getting my friends turned on to longevity medicine and medicine 3.0. It's just so much fun to watch it all evolve and people can become more aware of it. With like Brian Johnson, the good or the bad or whatever you think about him, but he's been crazy prolific with getting people knowing about longevity medicine. I was at a birthday party Friday, and I don't know, we're somehow talking about performance because there's a lot of cyclists there, and I'm a big cyclist, as you know. And talking with these people and talking about like, hey, yeah, Brian Johnson, is that Annie? It's like everyone knows about that. So I think it's a really good thing to bring so much awareness around this. It's like, hey, there is an option to live a lot healthier and a lot cleaner, longer, the quality of years, like people are just kind of tuning into this. It almost seems like old hat for me, because I'm like, man, I've known about this forever. Of course you can live a lot longer and a lot healthier, but it's really cool to come across people that just are tuning into it. And you're like, whoa, this is so cool. It's a really neat point of time to be involved in this industry. With you, what types of patients are you most hoping to reach with your practice in particular? You mentioned a little bit of athletics, a little bit of, aging into, meeting people where they're at. Is there types of patients that you would like to work with most, or how is that, who are those people that you want to reach out to?
Yeah, I will say I really consider myself a generalist through and through. Like that is the physician identity that I carry, a general internal medicine practitioner. I certainly gravitate towards individuals who are really invested in their health and in their athletic performance, however they define that. Whether that's someone who says, I want to be PRing a marathon, or someone who says, I have a big hike coming up next summer with my kids and my grandkids, and I want to be able to, be leading the pack on the trails in Yosemite or the trails somewhere else, right? People who have the desire to be active participants in life in whatever shape or form. I think that's something that really resonates with me on a personal level. And I think it draws on the skill sets that I have in these different areas, in the strength and conditioning, fitness and nutrition coaching, and then also high level internal medicine that I was able to learn and train and practice at UCSF. And so people who want to take that sort of next level approach, not just to sort of optimizing the biomarkers and the variables, but again, do that in service to participating in life in a way that's going to give them meaning. And then another aspect of it that is really important to me is the mental and the emotional health piece of it. I think that this is such a key component, especially as individuals age into their 60s and 70s. We know that social isolation, we know that loneliness can be such a catalyst towards age-related decline. And I think about how much there's an opportunity for that engagement in life in various forms of activity, whether that's sport or leisure activity, longevity, but just being out there and again, able to participate in life can be such a boon to the mental and the emotional health. And also when disease comes up or when problems come up, it takes a toll on our body and also on our minds and on our hearts. And so that is a real sort of thread that I try to weave through my practice as well. Is yes, we want to be performing and achieving well, but we want to do that with hopefully a heart that feels full and with relationships around us that support that. And so people who are interested in that approach are looking for a primary care physician who takes that perspective on things. I would love to get a chance to talk with them.
Yeah, that's a huge part. I think it's so easily overlooked. And I know Peter Tia talked about that in his book, that the mental health component of it is such a huge part of a longevity and healthy life, where I think a lot of times it's easily overlooked because you're like, oh, the supplements, my workout regimen, my sleep, and et cetera, while often overlooking the social mental health part of it. I just watched a documentary on blue zones and, like all these things. And it talked about like, okay, what do they all have in common? It talked about diet and whatever. But the one thing that was definitely a consistent common thread was the social aspect of it. You have a social, like just a support system all the way around, and that can be family, that can be people in your community, friends, to do that with. And that was just such an important part. So yeah, that's nice to hear you talk about that too. So I know we're winding up on time here. So I want to know how people can get a hold of you. What's some of the best ways to get a hold of you if they're interested in finding out more of what you do? Especially if someone lives in California or New York, because that's the two states that you're currently okay to work with, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So my website is kurosmedical.com, KUROS medical.com. There's a contact form on there. People can also email me directly. My email through the website is jack@kurosmedical.com. I also have a Substack as you mentioned, called the Kuros Corner that people are welcome to subscribe to. It is free articles. I post there a couple times a month, both kind of a mixture of writings about the practice of medicine as well as some disease-specific aspects of it. But those two areas, my Substack and my website, are probably the best ways to be in touch, again, through the contact form or a direct.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Jack, thanks for spending some time with me today and talking about Kuros and your approach to Medicine 3.0. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll connect again soon enough. I think you're going to be in Austin here in a month or two, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, looking forward to meeting you, meeting up with you then too. But otherwise, thanks for coming on.
Oh, Brent, thank you. This was a blast. I always appreciate the chance to get to talk. And yeah, I'll see you in a couple months in May.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
This is the Longevity Loop podcast.